All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Tracy Lott McFadden, a member of the Bible Way Church of Atlas Road, and I'm also one of the radio broadcast announcers for our weekly program that airs in Columbia, South Carolina. I am here today with members of the Senior Enrichment Ministry, along with members of the Bible Way Church Men's Ministry, and they have joined together for a voter registration initiative, Count Me In, My Vote Is My Voice. So we are here to learn more about the voter registration process, the election process, and how we as members of our community can become more involved with the elections here in South Carolina, not just for this year, but for every election year afterwards. So that's our state, local, county, and national elections. To share some of that information with us, we have special guest, Mr. Kel Carter, who is the voter outreach coordinator with the Richland County Elections and Voter Registration Office, Mr. Dean Crates, chairman of the Lexington County Registration and Elections Board, and hopefully later on in the call, Mr. Chris Whitmire will get to join us. He is the director of the Public Information and Training with the South Carolina State Election Commission. So welcome to everyone this afternoon. All right, so before we begin our Q&A session, if I could just get Mr. Carter and Mr. Crates to take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about what it is that you do in your position with the local county elections office.
All right, so should I go first? Oh.
Sure, Mr. Carter, go ahead.
Okay, so I am the voter outreach coordinator, so primarily my job is to go out and provide assistance for people that are requesting to do voter registration drives. Okay. More recently, due to COVID-19, I've primarily been providing voter education seminars, primarily with the goal of informing people who wish to conduct voter registration drives about advice as to how they should conduct the voter registration drive, as well as providing you with information regarding election laws and parameters that I suggest that they should follow in terms of not only conducting the voter registration drive, but protecting people's information while they're doing so, and making sure that proper information is getting out to the public in that regard. So,
thank you, Mr. Crates.
Yeah, Pat. Yes, I'm Dean Crapes. I'm with Lexington County Voter Registration and Elections. I recently retired from the director position about a little over a year ago, but I got appointed to the board. So I'm still heavily involved in day-to-day operations when it comes around to elections and whenever it gets to any other questions that they basically have. Because I was here for a little under 20 years. And so the current director, she calls me in quite a bit to help out and don't have a problem with it, and just to make sure that things run smooth and to make sure that things are going to run smoothly here come November. Thanks.
Well, thank you to both of you for joining us today. We are really privileged to have you with us. So I guess one of the most pressing questions has to do with the deadlines that are coming up within the next 2 weeks. So what is the deadline to register to vote in order to be able to cast a ballot in this November election? Who wants to take that one?
Kel, you want to go with that one?
Yes, sir. I'll go ahead and take it. So in terms of deadlines, the deadline to register to vote in person is October 2nd, and the last day to register via online will be October 4th. Now, I just got word today that we will also be open October 3rd as well. So from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m. So if people wish to vote, to not vote, but rather register in person, October 3rd will be the last day to register in person. However, I suggest that when it comes to not only in person, but mail-in, I suggest that if anybody is registered in person as well as registered via mail, that they get their information in by October 2nd.
Okay, definitely. So October 2nd is the deadline we want to shoot for. Dean, correct. Go ahead. Did you want to add to that?
I always tell people to do not wait if you need to get registered. And if you're not registered, you know that's the last day. Because if he's like Mr. Carter there, we get hundreds of new registrations in online and through the mail. And I tell people to do it as fast as you can. Do not hesitate. Do not wait. Get everything in. Therefore, we can guarantee you then if there's a problem or if you don't get something in a couple of weeks, we'll say, give us a call back at the office because we want to make sure everything is done correctly to allow you to vote.
Certainly. So along with that, is there a waiting period once someone registers, and even if someone registers this close to the deadline, is there a waiting period before that individual can participate in an election?
No, if you register within the dates that Mr. Carter just said, you will be an active voter to be able to participate in the November election.
Okay, certainly. Thank you. So how can individuals verify their voter registration status?
Okay, well, I'll go with that one. We have really two ways. You can go to www.scvotes.org, and on there is a lot of information from the absentee to checking your voter registration to just make sure everything is correct. Or you can basically call your local office, and we have extra people in here on phones to basically answer those questions. Just people want to make sure that they are registered to vote and they are basically active. Also, another way, if someone, there's a place on scvotes.org to basically do your absentee application, but we'll cover that later there too.
All right, so this question, I believe, goes along with registering to vote and your information. Can a person use a post office box or their address where they are away attending college as a permanent address for voter registration?
I'll take that one. In terms of election law 7-1-25, while people can use their dormitory address as a residency address, in terms of PO boxes, thus far from reading, I haven't seen any mention of PO boxes being used as proof of residency, because again, when it basically, a residency is basically defined as a place where you basically lay your head.
Certainly.
And so you can use your dormitory address, but using a PO box as a residency address, so far I'm not seeing anything that correlates with that. But with that being said, so say for example, you have a college student that has a dormitory address and also has a PO box address.
Okay.
What they can do when they fill out the registration form, they can list their dormitory address as their residency address, and under the mailing address column, they can list their PO box if that's where they want to receive their voter registration card.
Okay, great.
Right.
So it's best to have a physical location, a physical address to list as your permanent address.
Exactly.
Great. The next questions submitted, do I need to re-register to vote if I have moved to South Carolina? So say an individual was registered their previous location of residence, or even if they lived here 4 years ago, moved away and returned to South Carolina, will they need to re-register to vote?
I can take that one again.
Okay, go with Carter.
So in terms of, in the situation that you described, yes, they would have to re-register to vote. And the reason why is because the way that registration is currently set up in the state of South Carolina, if you, like say for example, if you are within the Richland County or Lexington County and you move to a different address within that county, then all you would have to do is just update your address. You just go to your office and fill out an address change form. Okay. But if you are moving from outside that county, say for example, if I'm moving from Charleston to Richland County, then I would be considered a new registrant and I would have to completely fill out a new form. And it's the same thing with a person that's coming from out of state. Even though they will still have their information will still be on file, they would still have to update their information as a new registered voter in that specific county.
Okay, that makes sense. So any relocation, please be mindful if you have moved from county to county, even if you're still in the state of South Carolina or recently returning to South Carolina, please update your information. And they can do that with the local voter registration office, correct? Or even when you get your driver's license, can't you fill out your voter registration information when you update your change of address on the driver's license?
Yes, ma'am. What the most common way that people tend to register is coming to the office, but also you can do so when you get your new driver's license. And say, for example, if you get your new driver's license, but you might have forgotten to check the box off at the DMV, you can also go to scvotes.gov and basically fill out the application online as well. But that's if you have a South Carolina DMV ID. Now, other ways that people get their addresses or register to is, of course, through voter registration drives, and that would be considered registering by mail. So,
one thing that Mr. Carter had there that we find a lot of is that when people were dealing with the DMV, they'll go to SCDMV online, and when they update their address online, they're assuming that it's automatically taken care of with us.
Right.
And as
it's
Mr.
not.
Carter said, you have to walk in and you have to sign the form, and you have to check the form that you want to have your address updated, or it will not go. And that's just some bad information that people, it gets passed around and around, and it is not accurate. You have to literally go into a DMV brick and mortar store to get it done.
Thank you for pointing that out. That is great information. So some questions for election day. If a voter goes to the poll on election day and they have not changed their address, or they've forgotten their identification cards, they don't have their ID with them, what options does that voter have to make sure his or her ballot is cast and counted on election day?
Okay, I'll go with that, Mr. Carter, and you can back me up there. Okay, one of them was I go to the place to vote, and I forgot my voter ID. Okay. The person literally has two choices: either to go back home and get their ID and come back. And I know with us, I always tell the precinct workers, if someone forgets it and they go back, you can come back and remember the guy's name or the lady's name and write it, the voter's name, and write it down so you can give them headline privileges, because I think it's wrong for them to have to wait in line again for a total total just forgetfulness, you know. Or if they want to vote a provisional ballot, they can, and then they have until we do the certification, and in this case it'll be 9 o'clock Friday morning, to come to the office and show their picture ID in order for their vote to count. If they don't come in and show their ID, the vote will not count.
Okay. And along with that, the change of address. If they come in and they have not updated that address and it's checked against the roll at the polling place, what options do they have in that matter?
Okay, back me up on this, Mr. Carter. That it falls up under fail-safe. In other words, they move from one precinct to another within the same county. They have a choice of going back to the old precinct and vote a fail-safe ballot, which is a limited ballot with countywide and above on it, or they can go to the local voter registration office and update their address then and basically vote a full ballot on the fail-safe guidelines at the local voter registration office. Did I get that right, Mr. Carter?
Yes, sir. You got it right, sir.
Good. That was always been a hard one for me.
So explain to me what a fail-safe ballot is. Would that be like a temporary ballot? There are some questions in here concerning provisional ballots, and if it goes along with that, are those type of ballots that will still be counted?
Yes, they would be. Yeah, the board would get together on that Friday morning to certify the election. They would look at all the provisional ballots or whatever, provisional ballots, and fail-safe is included in the provisional ballots or the challenge ballots. And they would basically say confirm or deny, the ballot right then and there. And, we probably, if we have, it's only usually a handful that isn't, but it's very obvious why they aren't counted. They're not counted.
Okay, but other than that, they would be counted. So from election night, all of the precincts really have up until Friday morning to count all their ballots, secure those numbers, and certify the votes. In a normal election year. Yeah, in a normal election year, yes. Let's say normal, yes. Right. I know we always try to get the precincts and all the absentee counted and loaded up by 7 on election night. And then we have the provisional ballots or the challenge ballots that we get some information on, and then we look at them Friday morning or certification time, and then we decide how we're going to vote with that, deal with those. Deal with those votes. Okay, great. So what should an individual do if they go to their voting place and they are told that they are not registered to vote? on election day? What are their options? Once they get there and they're told when the roll is checked that they're not registered, does that individual have any options in casting a ballot?
Okay, you want that, Mr. Carter?
I'll try to explain this one the best I can in that regard.
Okay.
So,
And I'll back you up. That's why I said that. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. So normally in situations like that, they would then be asked to contact our office. And in the situation of contacting our office, like say for example, if it's a situation where like they might show up as not registered, but actually they are, then we can go ahead and kind of guide them through that. But in most situations, if they, like say for example, if it's a situation, and this actually happened in one of the elections before too, where someone thought they were registered, but they really weren't, and then we looked at the records and they actually weren't. And in a situation like that, now that's the part I'm still learning. So that, because I want to say that in a situation like that, then there's really no way we can really assist them in terms of voting, but
Okay.
I may be wrong in that regard. So,
Dean, is that pretty much how it
I'll
would
take
go?
that back too. I know if they go to the precinct, the first thing we ask them is, and I know with the new poll books we have, we can look them up. Now, they may just be at the wrong precinct, okay, or something like that. Because, you know, these poll books are precinct specific, but we have the ability to type and go all, and we can look at all over the county and say, you're at the wrong precinct, you need to go over here to be able to vote. Because I know in Lexington County, and I'm sure in other counties too, you can stand at a street corner and be in 4 different precincts. And that's how close some of these precincts are with the population. Yeah, and if the person is just in the wrong precinct, we just say you need to go here to be able to vote. But if they're not registered, and if they swear that they are registered and they did what they needed to do and they got proof of this and proof of that, they can call the office. If they said they went to the DMV, we have the ability to call state elections, and they have one person that will look on the DMV records. They have access to it on election day and say, yes, that person did get registered and they're registered on time. Now, whatever reason they didn't show up in the book, that could be something that fall back on us. So what we do there is we'll have them vote a challenge ballot or a provisional ballot. And then we'll look at it when they say on Wednesday morning, we'll look it up, or Thursday while we get prepared before the certification. And we will say, you know, yes, they're good for whatever reason. We have no reason why they weren't on the books, why they weren't there, and everything will be counted. They will updated. And then there's some instances where, you know, people, they just say, instead of getting their stuff to them, like earlier you just asked, the voter registration deadline. If they're after the deadline, I'm sorry, you know, we really can't do anything. But we really want to get them and make sure they are registered for any of future elections that they may have. Okay,
great. Sounds good. So speaking about those provisional ballots, everybody may not understand that at times. So the difference can one of you explain the difference between, you know, the regular ballot and those provisional ballots? We've already discussed that they are counted pretty much the same, but what is a provisional ballot?
Basically, a provisional ballot is the same ballot as a regular absentee ballot. They're all the same. They're just we have them in the precinct. So if someone comes in, like we just discussed, it may be I'm not on the registration, but I know I did it. And we will basically use that provisional ballot and then vote provisional because we want to go back and look at it and take a little more time to take this voter out. It's what it basically is. It's not saying the vote's not going to count. It's just saying we want to double check and make sure that we got it right for any future elections. Provisional is another name. We used to call it challenge, but that's why we went to provisional, because they're not really challenging the voter. We just want to make sure that everything is correct about the voter so we can get the ballot counted. Did I get that right, Mr. Carter? It's kind of jumpy on that one.
Oh, yes, sir. You got it. Because that's it. When it comes to that portion, I'm still learning that portion because, again, most of my stuff is mostly outreach and stuff.
So the provisional ballots are allowed to be cast if the voter registration has to be verified.
Correct.
Okay.
So that is correct. Yes.
All right. Good. Let's kind of talk. This is another question that was submitted for a physically ill individual. An incapacitated voter, someone who may have COVID-19 or who may have been quarantined or is a disabled person, and they cannot physically go to the polls on election day. How can that incapacitated voter cast a vote for an election?
Now,
Well, that would be, go ahead, Ms. Carter.
oh, thank you, sir. Now, normally in a situation like that, it would be advised that they would do a mail-in absentee voting. Now, if it's a situation to where, now say for example, if it's a situation where they were initially feeling pretty well and the deadline has passed and now they're not feeling so well, if it's a situation to where, say for example, if it's a situation to where they do not have COVID but they're not feeling well, then when it comes to it, they have the option of doing curbside voting, which basically means that they can still come to the precinct, but the machine will be brought out to them and they can go ahead and vote. But they can stay within their card and do so. Now, if it's a situation to where the person, like say for example, has a disability and needs assistance, then in a situation like that, when they come to vote, they can bring someone with them. And when they get to the counter or they do curbside, they can say, well, hey, this person right here, they are assisting me. Is that okay? And then usually the person that's assisting with the process say, okay, well, yes, they're good to go. And then the person can assist that person that needs assistance. So as they can have an assistant as long as they let someone know in advance. Like basically when they come to the counter and say, hey, this person's assisting me. Now, as for the COVID situation, that one's a little bit more tricky because if it's a situation to where, like say for example, if they started catching the symptoms prior, I would say basically prior to the start of absentee and they had time to request absentee ballot, they still can request it. And really on record, they still can request a mail-in absentee ballot until about October 30th. But in a time frame like that, I really wouldn't suggest waiting till October 30th to again request the absentee ballot, especially a mail-in absentee, especially if say for example the person is starting to feel symptoms of COVID the first week of absentee. If they're starting to feel symptoms that early on, they know they may have the ability, they may be quarantined, then I suggest that at that point they go ahead and request mail-in absentee ballot as soon as possible, so that way it can be mailed to them. But and if it's a situation where I would say after that, then that's going to be a little more of a tricky situation right there.
They would possibly miss their deadline to be able to cast their vote.
In terms of mailing, yes, ma'am. So because October 30th is the last day to request, and the last day that absentee lasts till November 2nd. And of course, when it comes to the mail-in ballots themselves, while you can get someone to drop them off on your behalf to the office, they still have to be in the office basically by election day, but really before election day in order for them to be counted.
Right. So before that November 2nd date, that's pushing it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And to back Mr. Carter.
Oh, sorry.
To back up and to kind of off of Mr. Carter there is that when it's the last week now, if we get lucky and the House and the Senate gets together, they're looking at moving it back a week, but right now it hasn't passed, so he's still correct on being at October the 30th. If it's like the last week and someone calls in and says, I need to get an application, we do our darndest to basically tell them, there may not be enough time. Could you please have someone come pick it up? Could you please come vote curbside? Because I do not want you to miss the vote because of something that's out of your control. Mail sometimes 3 to 5 days to first class mail, and that's 2 ways. You got to go out with the application and back, then you got to go out with the ballot and back. So that takes a little bit of time. We do our best to get them to come in and take care of it. Wood boom curbside, as Mr. Carter said there.
All right. Okay. Wonderful. This is a question concerning the homeless population. What are the laws in South Carolina concerning the voting rights of the homeless population? And are they even able to register to vote or cast a ballot in an election, considering they may not have a place of residency?
Now, in terms of the homeless, I wanted to say it again kind of goes to 7125.
Okay.
But I was trying to actually get some, basically see other laws that cross-reference, because in a situation for the homeless, what is advised in this situation is either A, use the residency of a place that they frequent, such as a shelter, or say, for example, like a relative's house where they know they can get consistent mail. But if it's a situation to where they do not have that, then I know in the case of, they're able to use the address of our elections office as a way to register to vote. And when it comes to that situation, if it's a situation where, say, for example, they use that address and they have a South Carolina driver's license and they can use that and as a photo ID, then pretty much they're good to go in terms of voting. Now, if it's a situation to, say, for example, where they registered, but they may not have a photo ID, or their photo ID may have been expired, what they can do, they can bring in their, like, once they register, they get a blue voter registration card. They can use that to get a voter photo ID, which is basically an ID that you can use in place of your driver's license or the other 5 approved IDs. And from there, they can use those materials to still cast their ballot.
Okay.
That's correct. Mr. Carter's correct. The same procedure we follow here in Lexington County. Same thing.
Great. All right. Because this is an unprecedented year with the pandemic, have there been any changes in the voting laws for South Carolina due to COVID-19? And I know, Dean, you referenced earlier that, you know, the legislators were looking at pushing a deadline back a week. But other than that, have they made any other changes to the South Carolina voting laws because of COVID?
Well, I got it here in front of me, and I was watching the Senate last week, and then I think today the House is in session, and they got a couple changes that the House wants to see. I think it'd have to go back to the Senate for approval.
Okay.
But they did. They're going to vote. They're going to put the COVID-19 as an excuse back on the absentee application again. And completed applications for absentee ballots must be received by the county on Saturday, October 24th, 2020. That's going to be the deadline to get all the applications in so we can get them mailed out. Because to get the ballots mailed out, it comes back, takes about 3 to 5 days. I want to make sure. Now, this is all pending legislation. Nothing has passed yet with that. And also, too, on here, if it passed, there's a couple of us, and maybe Mr. Carter, too, we have drop boxes out in front of our office. If this passed, they want to get rid of the drop boxes and force people or make them or have them come in and show that this is their ballot by checking their ID whenever they walk in. And there's a couple other things that are on here, but it's nothing that, you know, anything that's and like that. And well, one thing is the absentee, because it's so large, usually we can start working with the absentee the Monday before at 9 a.m. and they're going to move it back to Sunday at 7 a.m. We can start working with the absentee applications, absentee ballots, I'm sorry, to basically give us more time to get them prepped so we can get them scanned Tuesday night and get them counted and everything. It's still, they're still negotiating it now. Now, when will this be? But as of right now, Mr. Carter was correct. The last day is the 30th to be able to mail out a ballot. But if it changes, they just move it back a week, which I think is great, because the mail sometimes gets, with all the mail going on, all the ballots going on, it can get slow by no reason of anyone's fault. It just happens, okay?
Great.
That's it.
Thank you, Dean. All right, so there's been a lot of talk lately also about early voting and the absentee ballots, absentee ballot votings. What is the difference, and does our state even allow early voting? And then explain to us the difference between the absentee ballot, the vote by mail voting. And really, who can qualify to vote absentee? There are certain, you mentioned, Dean, that they may add the COVID-19 precaution, but as of now, something like that is not a reason that you would be able to vote absentee, correct?
That is correct. There's many reasons. You're going to be working, you're going to be a caregiver, you're U.S. military, you're going to be out of town, you're going to be on vacation. There's, I think, about 18 or 19 reasons now, and have one of them in front of me, that basically have reasons to be able to vote absentee. The difference between the absentee ballot and the actual ballot that you vote at the precinct, there is no difference. The ballot style is the same. So your neighbor, your wife can request to vote at home, and you as the husband going to go vote at the precinct. You'll have the same ballot. It just one to be paper and one to be sort of electronic, I guess you might say. We'll count that in a little bit different way. And what was your other question there, ma'am? I don't remember
about
that one.
Does our state allow early voting, or just the vote by mail?
Currently, early voting is usually just voting without a reason. In this state, we still have to have a reason to be able to vote by mail. Okay, that's where it's at right now. I have been a big advocate of just having early voting, say like 2 weeks before the election, just go for it and let anybody want to vote, whether you, regardless of who you are, with no reason, come in and just vote. But from some reason, they still want us to do it all with the reasons by mail.
Okay. And those reasons would pretty much be along the same reasons for your absentee ballot. If you're going to be out of town or not present, a caregiver, okay, healthcare kind of situation.
Yeah. There's numerous reasons there, numerous reasons there, and you can vote absentee.
Okay. Now, earlier when you referenced the drop boxes for the absentee ballots, will that be something that will be in place this election cycle, where people can submit their absentee ballots via the drop boxes, or is it recommended that they take them straight to the local election office?
You want that, Mr. Carter?
Yes, sir. I can answer. So I know in terms of our county, the initial plan was to have ballot boxes and have either a poll worker or a staffer to observe the ballot boxes to make sure that because the ballot boxes themselves would only be open for as long as the office was open. Okay. But now I know from the way that's being discussed now, from talking to the director, we may not use ballot boxes this time. And what's going to be encouraged is that for people that are going to drop their ballots off, that they will basically drop them off at our office, either at our office or during the absentee period, drop them off at one of the satellite locations. So that way the person that is over that satellite location can bring those ballots back to the office at the end of that day. Now, when it comes to dropping off the ballots themselves, I know the main thing that we had to deal with because I know in June there was really, in June you didn't have to worry about having a witness signature, but again, looking at the way that the legislation is passing, the law currently, they're going to still have to have a witness signature. And also, if they wish to drop off someone else's ballot, like say for example, like their grandmother or father or a sibling, they would have to provide basically provide. Oh, sorry, I had my phone on the charger sadly, but they would have to fill out the sheet that comes with the absentee ballot. That in essence the voter gives permission to that person to drop off that ballot on their behalf. Okay. So they would have to make sure that once they do drop off the ballot, if they're dropping off their own ballot, they wouldn't have to worry about that. But they do have to make sure they have their signature and a witness signature thus far. And if it's a situation to where they're dropping off their own ballot as well as like for their immediate family members, then they would have to have that authorization form with those other four to show that, hey, that those people gave me permission to drop off their ballots on their behalf.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people volunteer to help the elderly, the seniors in their community or within their home. But if that authorization form is not completed, does that invalidate that ballot?
Well, with the authorization form, if it's not completed, we cannot accept that ballot from the person that's dropping it off. But if it's a situation to, like, say, for example, because this actually happened with the June primary where it was a group of 5 people, they were all immediate family, where they came to the office and they tried to drop off all their ballots, but none of them had an authorization form. So the person that was dropping off her ballot, we was able to take hers, but basically the only way we could take everybody else's, ballot was either if they got the authorization form, which ultimately what ended up happening, we ended up providing copies of the authorization form to them so they can basically take it back to their families and make sure that everything was filled out and then bring them back up. Or, and also in another situation where everybody was in the car, so they were able to bring in their individual ballots. So in the situation like that, if people are dropping off someone's ballots, the main thing that I would have to emphasize to them is to make sure that they have that authorization form with them and not inside the ballot envelope, outside of it on top of the ballot itself.
Okay.
Or the envelope to be turned in. Exactly.
I'm glad you brought that authorization form up, because a lot of people may have not have known that. You think you're doing a good deed, helping everyone to gather their ballots and to get it turned in on time, but without that form, there may be some problems. I'm glad you brought that up. Okay, we're getting ready to wind down. Just a few more questions I kind of want to touch on. We talked about early voting already. So what happens if a person arrives to their election polling place at closing, right at closing, or a few minutes after? Are they still allowed to cast a vote that day? Say, even if there's a line still present, how does that work with the cutoff time?
Well, I'll take that, Mr. Carter, and then you can back me up if you guys have any difference here. What we tell everyone at the precincts, at 7 p.m., the precincts closed.
Okay.
If you are in line at 7 p.m., you're allowed to vote, whether that takes an hour, 30 minutes, however. If you pull up there at 7:05 and think you want to get in the line, I'm sorry, but we got to cut the line off sometime. So as long as you're in line by 7 p.m., I tell my poll clerks, I said, walk out in the parking lot. If you see anybody getting out of the car, scream at them, get here, get in line now, and then stop it. I think if you're there in the parking lot, I think you're pretty good with me. And then you go in it. But if it's after, like I said, 7:10 or 7:05, 7:10, I'm sorry, we got to cut it off somewhere.
All right, so make sure you are there on the day of the election by 7 p.m. That is the cutoff time. So go ahead, Mr. Carter.
Also, I wanted to build on top of what he said as well. I know in our county, the way it's set up is that, like, say, for example, if you're in line and it's 7 o'clock, normally what happens at 7 o'clock is that one of the poll workers will go out to the very end of the line and kind of serve as a marker to say that, okay, this is where the line was at 7. Okay. And then anyone that comes after that poll worker, I'm sorry, they pretty much missed out. But if it's a situation to where, like, say, for example, if it's a situation where it's 7 o'clock and people are still coming in line, as long as, in essence, as long as they make it there before that poll worker gets to the anchor of the line, then they'll be able to vote.
Correct.
All right, speaking about voters, so say if an individual just feels that their voting rights on the day of election has been suppressed, or that their voting rights have been violated during this election cycle or any election cycle, what options does that individual have?
I tell anyone that if something don't go your way, if you think something is wrong, as you say, I'm being oppressed or whatever the concern is, you give the office a call. We have numerous phone lines coming in because and let someone get in charge of someone here in the office, in touch with them, so we can solve your problem immediately and find out what's going on and what the problem is, okay? I know during the last 18 general election, we had several voters come in and call in, and I think they were more confused than they were basically just being oppressed. Because one voter said, I've been voting here for years and years. I said, yes, ma'am, we split the precinct and we sent out new cards. And then at the same breath, she said, that's why I got a new card in the mail. I said, yes, ma'am. I said, go to this precinct and you'll be able to vote. So, you know, things like that can occur. We're here to ensure that everyone gets registered on time, is an active register, and vote. And it's very important that everyone does that.
Great. So this will be our final question. I'm wrapping it up. As for all the citizens, for those that will be logging on, viewing this, for everyone here in South Carolina, what can we do to improve the voting process, to be more involved as poll workers or election volunteers, or to be able to get involved? What do you recommend for the community members? Okay, you want to start with it, Mr. Carter?
Yes, ma'am. So one of the things that I advise when it comes to helping improve the system, doing research beforehand, because one of the things that's one of the things I have to stress, that even my voter education, my voter registration drive educations, study, basically be ahead of the curve by doing research beforehand, understanding what's going on. If something is confusing, contact the office and ask questions. Don't go to a secondhand source and ask the secondhand source if you have a question about something that's going on. Sure. Another thing too, if it's a situation, I tell people too, if you're, say for example, you don't know if you're registered, you say, well, I'm registered, but I don't know. Again, contact the office, or in some cases, if you had a voter registration drive and you say, well, I updated my information, but I'm not sure, just fill out the form and just send it back in, because worst case scenario, just be a duplicate form that we have to take care of. But best case scenario, if it's a situation where, like, okay, well, I'm not sure, when you get the form in, oh, well, this person wasn't registered, but good thing they sent the form in, so we can go ahead and take care of that now. So mostly, I'll say the core of it is being proactive about the process itself, and not waiting until the last minute, or basically wait until the 11th hour to try to figure things out. Because again, the earlier you get on stuff, the earlier you are in terms of researching and being informed about it, the less likely you're going to stress out, the less likely you're going to panic, and then in turn that carries over. So my overall core takeaway for people: be proactive, do research, and if you have questions, contact the elections office, and don't go to a secondary source that has hearsay, basically.
Certainly. Same thing for Lexington County, Mr. Dean.
Oh, yes, ma'am. We also too, and I'm sure Mr. Carter is going to probably say, oh, good point there. We always and still are looking for extremely good, dedicated poll workers. We need people to basically fill up our precincts and to be able to work in the precincts. And one of the other things, if I may there, we get calls, and we're constantly getting them now too. Where do I get information about the candidates? The voter registrations office, we do the voting and stuff in the registration. We really don't have any information on the candidates. What I tell the people to do is to call the local parties, and they will have information on it, or it's, everybody says Google. Well, Google the name of the candidate and find out what they stand for, or however they stand for it. But the local parties usually can mail stuff out to the people so they can get some information, as Mr. Carter said. Be a little proactive and be ready to go whenever you walk in.
Certainly.
Thank
you, gentlemen, so much for joining us today. This was great information to get us better prepared for this election and for future elections. I think that's important. Everybody don't just gear up for this 2020 election. We got to remember, for every election after this, we need to stay informed, have the information, do our research, like Mr. Carter said earlier. And as Dean stressed, also volunteer to be poll workers, because we all want to get involved and be a part of our community. So thank you so much again for joining us today. A special thank you to the men's ministry at Bible Way Church and to the Senior Enrichment Ministry for sponsoring this meeting today. And also big thank you to our media department for helping with the production of this. And I would like to stress again to our viewers, if you need additional information on voter registration and the upcoming deadlines to participate in this election, please visit the Voter Registration and Elections Department website of Richland County and Lexington County. That will be the best source of information for this election cycle. And on election day, I'm sure Elder Scott may mention this also, if you need a ride to the polls, please call us at 803-647-5167. And we look forward to seeing everyone very soon. Please stay safe, take care, and thank you again for joining us for this voter registration information town hall.
Absolutely enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Elder Scott, did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to both of you gentlemen. Really appreciate it. Thank you, Tracy, for monitoring this and for being our moderator. We really appreciate it. And again, we wanted to put something together for our church family and for our community and let them know the things that are happening in our city and our county, and let them know that it is safe. We have a very good election process here in South Carolina, and we are grateful for all of the great work you all are doing. And we're just looking forward to everybody getting out and voting. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
All right, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much. And I think they're going to edit this, probably this last part. Me talking now, they'll edit this all out. But thank y'all so much. Appreciate everybody doing it. We're sorry that Chris couldn't make it here today, but we're glad everybody's here. We have Elder Sally Cuffers on the line. I think she wants to also say some thanks to you guys also. Then we have a couple other folks on the line. I'm not sure if they want to say anything, and that's okay, because that'll be edited out at the end of the recording. So
yes, thank you, Jeff. I would like to say thank you to all of our guests, Mr. Crepes, Mr. Carter. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with us. Tracy, excellent. Thank you so much for your participation with this. And Jeff, we thank you as well.